Some folks say the good Lord puts people in your path for a reason. I've lived long enough to believe that's true. This story ain't fancy. It's about a young woman who had nothing but a patched dress and a one-way ticket to marry a stranger. It's about a rainy night when she opened her door to two souls she didn't know. Sometimes the biggest turns in life come quiet, wrapped in thunder and a child's cough. I heard this tale years ago from a woman who swore every word was gospel. Whether you believe it or not, well, that's between you and your heart. The knock came twice before Clara Mercer reached the door. Rain hammered the tin roof like a judgment. She pulled back the warped wood, and the storm threw itself inside, along with a man holding a child who wasn't breathing right. "Please," his voice scraped raw. "She's burning up." The girl's face pressed against his chest. Blue lips, wet hair plastered to her forehead. 4 years old, maybe 5. Too small to be this still. Clara stepped back without thinking. "Get her by the stove." The man moved fast. Water pooled on the floorboards behind him. Clara grabbed her only quilt, her mother's, the one she'd packed for her new life tomorrow, and wrapped it around the shivering child before she could talk herself out of it. The coal oil lamp flickered. Thunder cracked close enough to rattle the window glass. She didn't know his name. Didn't know where he came from. Didn't know that by morning, everything she thought she knew about her future would be ash. If this opening tugged at something in your chest, I'd love to hear where you're joining us from tonight. As my grandmother used to say, a story shared is a story doubled. Caleb Stone watched the woman move through her kitchen like someone used to making nothing stretch. The cupboard hung open. 3 tins, a jar of molasses scraped near empty, a heel of cornbread wrapped in cloth. She didn't look at him when she set the food on the table, didn't apologize for how little there was. Lily sat wrapped in the quilt, color finally returning to her cheeks. Through the night, the fever had eased slow, stubborn, breaking only when the first gray light touched the window. Now she leaned against Caleb's arm, watching the woman with the kind of open curiosity only children have. "You live here alone?" Lily asked. The woman, Clara, she'd said her name, was nodded. "For now." "Where's your husband?" Caleb's hand tightened on Lily's shoulder. "That ain't polite to ask." "It's all right." Clara crouched by the stove, feeding it another piece of wood. The firelight caught the patches on her sleeves. 2 on each elbow, stitched tight and even. "I ain't got one yet. I'm traveling tomorrow to meet him. You don't know him." Clara's hands stilled on the iron door. "Not yet." Caleb broke the cornbread, gave Lily the larger piece without thinking. When he looked up, Clara was watching his hands. Something flickered across her face recognition. Maybe, the way one person sees their own habit in another. She poured coffee into 2 tin cups, pushed one toward him. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Ranch outside of Lawton. Man named Hoskins sent for me." The name hit Caleb like cold water. He knew Hoskins. Bought cattle from the man 2 years back. Watched him kick a horse that stumbled. Heard the workers talk in low voices about wages never paid, about a temper that ran hot and mean. One hand had quit after Hoskins took a horsewhip to a boy 16 years old, dropped a feed bucket, and Hoskins had drawn blood for it. His jaw locked. He lifted the cup, drank, said nothing. Lily tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Can you braid hair? My mama never did braids." Clara looked down at the child. Something softened in her posture, not pity. Something else. Something like recognition. "I can do braids," she said. "If your papa says it's all right." Caleb nodded, watched Clara's fingers work through Lily's damp hair, gentle and sure, watched his daughter's eyes drift closed, and he thought, she's walking straight into that man's house, tomorrow. The coffee turned bitter on his tongue. Clara woke to silence. The rain had stopped. Gray light filtered through the window, soft and early. She lay still for a moment, listening. The child's breathing came steady from the corner where she'd made a pallet. The man Caleb sat in the chair by the cold stove, chin dropped to his chest, arms crossed. She rose without sound. Her feet found the floorboards in the familiar pattern that avoided creaks. The door opened on oiled hinges. The woodpile stopped her cold. Yesterday it had been 3 logs, maybe 4, enough for one more night if she rationed. Now split oak rose in a neat stack against the wall, enough for a week. The cuts were clean, the wood dry. Someone had worked in the dark, in the rain, while she slept. Clara's hand pressed flat against her breastbone. She stood there longer than made sense. The morning air carried the smell of wet earth and cedar. A meadowlark called somewhere past the fence line. Her trunk sat packed inside, ready for the stage, for the 17 cents in her pocket, a letter from a man she'd never met, and firewood she hadn't asked for. The door scraped behind her. She didn't turn. Couldn't sleep. His voice came rough with mourning. Figured I might as well be useful. Clara kept her eyes on the woodpile. I can't pay you back for this. Didn't ask you to. She turned then. He stood in the doorway, shoulders filling the frame, squinting against the pale light. His clothes had dried overnight, stiff and wrinkled. The boots caught her attention again, too fine for a drifter, the leather too well oiled. She'd noticed them last night, told herself it didn't matter. I ain't used to folks doing things without asking for something back, she said. His jaw shifted. Then you've been around the wrong folks. The words hung there. Clara didn't know what to do with them. He stepped onto the porch, moving past her to check the sky. His shoulder brushed hers, warm through the thin cotton of her dress. She didn't step away, didn't know why. This man you're going to, he said. Hoskins, you know much about him. The question landed strange, too casual. His shoulders had tensed. He sent for me, Clara said. Paid for the stage fare? That's enough. Caleb's jaw worked. He looked past her, toward the road that curved away into the distance. His hands hung loose at his sides, but his fingers kept flexing. You met him, talked to him. Letters. 3 of them. Clara crossed her arms. Why you asking? He didn't answer right away. The meadowlark called again. Somewhere down the road, a wagon creaked distant, heading the other direction. No reason, he said finally. Just wondering. But his eyes said different. His eyes said he knew something she didn't. Clara filed that away. She'd learned young to notice when men held back words, usually meant trouble, sometimes meant worse. I should get breakfast started, she said. What little there is, I can hunt. Saw rabbit tracks by the creek. You don't have to. I know. He was already moving toward the lean-to where he'd stabled his horse. Won't be long. Clara watched him go. The boots, the horse a good one, well fed, better than anything a drifter would own. The way he moved, confident and sure, like a man used to having space. Something didn't add up. She was too tired to figure out what. Inside, Lily stirred. The quilt rustled. Small feet padded across the floor. And then the child appeared in the doorway. Hair wild from sleep. The faded blue ribbon Clara had given her still clutched in one hand. "Miss Clara," Lily rubbed her eyes. "Can you do 2 braids today?" "Mama never did 2. Clara's chest pulled tight. She crouched down, putting herself at the child's level. "I can do 2. I can do 3 if you sit still." 3. Lily's face split into a grin, showing her missing tooth. "I never had 3. "Well, then, let's fix that." Clara settled on the floor by the cold stove, Lily between her knees. The bone comb had 3 teeth missing, but it worked well enough. She started at the bottom of the tangles, working up slow and gentle, the way her own mother had done. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "No, ma'am. You're soft." The word landed somewhere Clara hadn't expected. Soft. When was the last time anyone had called her that? She was practical, sturdy, good for work and not much else. That's what her cousin had said when she'd arranged the mail order contract. "You ain't pretty, Clara, but you're strong. Man like Hoskins needs strong. Strong, not soft." But here was this child, leaning back against her knees, trusting her completely. "Miss Clara, why don't you got any little girls?" Clara's hands stilled for just a moment. Then she kept braiding. Part, separate, weave. "Haven't found the right situation yet. I suppose." "What's a situation?" "It's like the right time and place and person all coming together." Lily considered this. "Maybe your situation is coming soon." Clara's throat tightened. "Maybe." She finished the first braid, tied it off with the blue ribbon, then started on the second. Lily sat perfectly still, more patient than any child had a right to be. "My mama left," Lily said, matter of fact, like she was talking about the weather. "Papa said she went somewhere else. He don't like to talk about it." Clara's hands kept moving. Part, separate, weave. She didn't ask questions. Some things were too heavy for a child to carry, and pressing would only make the weight worse. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." "It's okay. She wasn't soft like you." The second braid. The third, smaller, woven into the crown. Clara worked by feel and memory, her mother's hands guiding hers across 20 years of distance. There, she sat back, 3 braids, just like I promised. Lily reached up to touch them. Her fingers traced the pattern, careful and wondering. Then she spun around and threw her arms around Clara's neck. The weight of her small and solid and warm pressed against Clara's chest. Lily's cheek found the hollow of her shoulder. Her arms locked tight. Clara's hands hovered, then settled. One on the child's back, one cupping the base of her skull, where the braids began. She closed her eyes, breathed once, twice. Lily didn't let go, and neither did Clara. When she opened her eyes, Caleb stood in the doorway. 2 rabbits hung from his hand, already cleaned. But he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at his daughter wrapped around this stranger, and at Clara's hands on his daughter's back, and at something he couldn't name passing between them. He opened his mouth, closed it, outside, the sound of hooves and wheels. Coming up the road. Clara's stomach dropped before her mind caught up. Caleb set the rabbits down, moved to the window, looked out. His whole body went rigid. "Get Lily to the back room," he said. "Now." Clara moved fast. She pulled Lily from her arms, guided her toward the back room. "Stay quiet, sweetheart. Don't come out till I say." "But Miss Clara." "Go." Lily went. The curtain fell behind her. Clara smoothed her dress, pushed loose hair behind her ears, walked to the door before whoever was outside could knock. Hoskins stood on the porch. He was shorter than she'd expected. Thick through the shoulders, thick through the waist. His hat dripped from the night's rain, and his eyes moved over her the way a man looks at livestock, face to hands to waist, measuring, calculating. "You're the Mercer woman." It wasn't a question. Clara stood in the doorway, blocking the view inside. Behind her, she could feel Caleb's presence still, watchful, saying nothing. "I am..." Hoskins nodded once. His jaw was heavy. His shoulders hunched forward. The knuckles on his hands looked wrong, scarred, and swollen. The kind that came from hitting things that didn't hit back. "Road's washed out past Miller's Creek," he said. "Stage ain't running for 3 days, maybe 4. I come to tell you myself." Clara's fingers tightened on the door frame. "That's kind of you." "Ain't kind, just practical." He looked past her, trying to see into the dim room. "You got company, travelers, got caught in the storm." His eyes narrowed. "A man." Clara held his gaze, didn't flinch. "A man and his daughter. They'll be gone today." Hoskins studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. The expression didn't reach his eyes. They stayed flat, cold, assessing. "See that they are." He turned, boot heels loud on the wet boards. At the edge of the porch, he stopped. "I'll send a man when the road clears. Be ready." He didn't wait for an answer. The wagon creaked as he climbed up. The horses, both thin, both skittish, jerked forward at the snap of his reins. Clara watched until the wagon disappeared around the bend. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed. "He's gone." Caleb's voice came from behind her. She nodded without turning. 3 days, she said. "Road's out. Stage ain't running." Silence. Then Lily's voice, bright and clear from behind the curtain. "You're staying. You're really staying." Something cracked in Clara's chest. She forced the words out steady. "Road says I am." "Ain't up to me." Lily burst through the curtain and grabbed Clara's hand. Her fingers were warm and small, sticky with something molasses from breakfast. Probably. "Can we do more braids? Can you teach me to do my own?" Clara looked at Caleb. He stood by the window, watching the road where Hoskins had gone. His jaw was tight. His hands hung loose at his sides, but his shoulders hadn't dropped. "Your papa might have other plans," Clara said. Caleb turned, met her eyes. "We ain't in a hurry," he said. "Figure I might fix that shutter while we're here. Looks like it's been hanging crooked a while." Clara's throat tightened. "You don't have to." "I know." He walked to the corner where she kept tools, found the claw hammer her father's, the handle worn smooth and dark with years of use. found the tin of hand-forged nails, tested the weight of both in his hands. "Hold this," he said to Lily. He handed her a nail. "Don't drop it." Lily clutched the nail like it was made of gold. "I won't." They worked through the morning. Caleb on the ladder borrowed from the neighbor's barn months ago, never returned, and Clara passing up tools. The shutter had warped in the wet. The hinges rusted. The wood split along one edge. Caleb sanded it smooth, oiled the hinges, realigned the frame. Their fingers brushed when she handed him a nail. Clara pulled back fast. He pretended not to notice, but she saw the way his hand stilled, just for a heartbeat. Lily sat on the porch, sorting nails by size, singing a song with no real words. The sun climbed higher. Sweat gathered at Clara's temples, at the small of her back. By noon, the shutter swung true silent, even, catching the light just right. "That ought to hold," Caleb said. He climbed down, stood beside her. They both looked at the shutter like it mattered more than it did. "Thank you," Clara said. "It's just a shutter." But it wasn't. They both knew it wasn't. Evening came slow and golden. Clara cooked the rabbits Caleb had caught roasted with wild onions she'd dug from behind the house. Lily insisted Clara sit beside her at the small table. The child pressed close, warm against Clara's arm, chattering about the nails and the ladder and how Papa almost fell but didn't. "He wobbled," Lily said, demonstrating with her hands, "like this. But he grabbed the edge and didn't fall." "I didn't wobble," Caleb said. "You did. I saw." Clara bit back a smile. "Sounds like wobbling to me." Caleb's eyes found hers across the table. The lamplight caught something there. Warmth. Maybe. Or surprise. Like he hadn't expected her to take Lily's side. After supper, he told a story. Something about a rabbit and a coyote. The rabbit always outsmarting. The coyote always trying again. His voice dropped low for the coyote, high and quick for the rabbit. Lily laughed until her eyes watered. Then the laughing slowed. The child's head grew heavy against Clara's shoulder. Her breathing deepened. Clara looked down at the dark hair. The small hand curled on her lap. Then she looked up at Caleb. He sat across from her, face half in shadow, half in firelight. The lines around his eyes had softened. He looked at his daughter, then at Clara, then at her hands, resting gentle on Lily's back. The fire popped. A log shifted. Neither of them spoke. Clara's chest ached with something she didn't have a name for. Something that felt like belonging. Something that felt like home. She shut it down. Had to. Can't afford wanting it. Tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that, the stage would come, the road would clear, and she would go to a man with scarred knuckles and flat eyes who'd looked at her like property. That was the plan. That had always been the plan. But sitting here, in the quiet, with this child's weight against her arm and this man's gaze soft in the firelight, Caleb spoke first. His voice came low, rough. "Some things ain't up to roads either." Clara's breath caught. Before she could answer, hooves sounded on the road again, moving fast. More than one horse. Caleb was on his feet before she could speak. The knock wasn't Hoskins. A boy stood on the porch, maybe 12 years old, hat too big for his head. He held a folded paper in one hand and a lantern in the other, the flame guttering in the evening breeze. "Message from town," he said. "Stage company sent word. Road's gonna be out 5 days now. Maybe 6. Creek's still rising." Clara took the paper. The boy's eyes moved past her, landed on Caleb. "Mr. Stone." The boy straightened, shoulders pulling back like a soldier coming to attention. "Didn't know you was out this way. My pa works your south fence line. Name's Henley." Clara's hand tightened on the paper. Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between Clara and the boy. His voice dropped low, firm. "Tell your pa the fence can wait till I'm back. And keep this visit to yourself. Here?" "Yes, sir. Mr. Stone." The boy touched his hat brim. "Ma'am." He was gone before Clara could speak, the lantern bobbing down the dark road until it disappeared around the bend. The silence that followed had weight. Clara unfolded the paper, read it without seeing the words. 5 days. 6 days. The numbers blurred and ran together. "Mr. Stone," she said it flat, testing the shape of it on her tongue. Caleb stood with his back to her. His shoulders had gone rigid, the line of his spine straight as a fence post. "Clara. Stone Ranch." She folded the paper again. Precise. Neat. The way she did everything when her hands wanted to shake. "I heard that name before. Biggest spread in the territory. 4,000 acres. Maybe 5. He turned. The lantern light from inside caught his face, the tight line of his mouth, the tension around his eyes. He looked like a man waiting for a blow. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" Clara's voice stayed even. She'd learned that young keep the voice level when everything else is falling. "You let me think you was a drifter. Let me give you my last meal. My mama's quilt on your daughter." "I never said I was a drifter. You never said you wasn't." She looked at his boots. Really looked. The way she should have from the start. Fine leather. Double-stitched seams. A shine even the mud couldn't hide. Worth more than everything she owned put together. Those boots cost more than this whole house. Caleb's hand moved to his pocket. Stopped. She saw the chain there, silver, catching the lamplight. A watch. She'd noticed it before. That first night, wet and shivering. Told herself it didn't matter. Everything mattered. She'd just been too hungry for kindness to see it. "I didn't tell you because—" He stopped, ran a hand over his face. "Because I wanted to know what you'd do when you thought we had nothing." Clara stared at him. "What I'd do? People act different when they know." His voice dropped, rough at the edges. "My wife did. Married the ranch, not me. Left when she figured out land don't keep you warm at night. Left Lily behind like she was, like she was nothing." The words hung there. Clara heard them, understood them, even. A woman who'd married for money and left when the money wasn't enough. A child abandoned. A man with walls built so high he couldn't see over them anymore. But understanding didn't stop the heat climbing her neck, didn't stop the pressure building behind her eyes. So this was a test. She stepped back, put distance between them. See if the poor mail-order bride would be kind to folks she thought was poor as her. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Then her voice cracked. Just once. She pulled it back together. "Tell me." Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a rich man playing pretend while I scraped my cupboard bare. Caleb's jaw worked. He didn't answer. Clara nodded. Once, sharp. I'm going to bed. Your daughter can have the quilt. You can sleep where you please. But come morning, I want you gone. She walked inside, didn't look back. The curtain to her room fell behind her like a door slamming shut. Caleb sat on the porch until the stars came out. The rocking chair creaked under his weight, Clara's rocking chair, probably her father's before that. The wood was worn smooth, the runners uneven. Everything in this place was worn and mended and kept going past its time. She'd given Lily the bigger piece of cornbread. He kept coming back to that. The way she'd done it without thinking, without calling attention, without expecting praise. The way poor people do when they're used to going without so others don't have to. His wife had never done that, not once in 5 years of marriage. The door opened behind him. Small feet padded across the boards. Lily climbed into his lap, warm and heavy with sleep, her braids still perfect from Clara's hands. Why's Miss Clara mad? Caleb pulled her close, pressed his cheek to the top of her head. She found out something about Papa, something I should have told her myself. What? That we got more than she thought we did. Lily was quiet for a moment. Her fingers played with the button on his shirt, the same button she always reached for when she was thinking hard. But Papa, she yawned, her voice thick with almost sleep. If she's nice when we got nothing, she'll be nice when we got something. That's how nice works. Caleb's throat closed. He held his daughter tighter. The words rattled around inside him, simple and clear and cutting straight through every wall he'd built. That's how nice works. From the mouth of a child who'd been abandoned by her own mother, a child who still believed in kindness, still trusted strangers, still threw her arms around a woman she'd known for 2 days, like that woman was the answer to every prayer she'd ever whispered. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe nice didn't change when circumstances did. Maybe the woman who'd wrapped a feverish child in her only blanket, the one she'd saved for her new life, would be the same woman no matter how much land he owned. Or maybe he'd already ruined it. Maybe his test had proven exactly what he was afraid of, not that Clara was mercenary, but that he was a coward. Too scared of being used to be honest. Too wounded to trust. Lily's breathing deepened. Her body went slack against his chest. Caleb looked at the closed curtain where Clara had disappeared. No light showed through the thin fabric. No sound. Just silence, heavy and cold. In the morning, she'd want him gone, and he'd have no one to blame but himself. Clara lay in the dark and listened to them on the porch. She couldn't hear the words, just the low rumble of his voice. Then silence. Then the creak of the rocking chair, father and daughter, wrapped up together in the night. She stared at the ceiling, counted the cracks she knew by heart, tried not to think about the way Lily had hugged her, the way Caleb's eyes had gone soft in the firelight, the way his fingers had brushed hers when she'd handed him that nail. It was a test. The thought burned. She'd been so careful all her life, never asking for more than she could pay back, never taking charity, never letting anyone see how much she wanted things she couldn't have. And he'd watched her, measured her, judged her worthy or not based on whether she'd share her last meal with strangers. She'd passed his test. That was the worst part. She'd given everything she had, and she'd passed. But passing a test wasn't the same as being seen, being valued, being wanted for herself and not for what she proved. In the morning, "I want you gone." The words echoed. She meant them. She had to mean them. But sleep didn't come easy. And when it finally did, she dreamed of fine leather boots and a child's voice saying, "That's how nice works." She woke before dawn with her pillow damp and her chest hollow, and the house was silent, too silent. Clara sat up, listened. No breathing from the main room, no weight of a man in the rocking chair. She crossed to the window, looked out. The porch was empty. The chair sat still. On the seat, folded neat, lay her mother's quilt. They were gone. But beside the quilt, weighted down with a stone, sat an envelope, and on the front, in careful handwriting she didn't recognize, was a single word, Clara. Clara's hands shook as she unfolded the letter. The paper was thick, good quality, not the cheap brown stuff she used for her own correspondence. She stood on the porch in her nightgown, bare feet cold against the wet boards, and read by the gray light of early dawn. "Clara, I should have told you the truth from the start. I didn't because I've been lied to by people who only saw the land and the money. My wife was one of them. She married the stone ranch and left when she realized a ranch can't hold you at night. When you gave Lily your only blanket, when you fed us your last meal without complaining. I thought, here's someone who gives what she can't afford to lose. That's rare. That's worth more than 4,000 acres. I know you're angry. You have a right to be. But I'm asking you to think about something. Hoskins is not a good man. I've seen what he does to horses. I've heard what he does to workers. I won't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this: you deserve better than him. If you change your mind about leaving, there's a place at the Stone Ranch, not as charity, as family. Caleb. Clara read it twice, 3 times. The words blurred on the 4th pass. She folded the paper, set it on the rocking chair, picked up the quilt still warm from where they'd slept, still carrying the faint smell of Lily's hair, and pressed it to her face. The tears came without permission. By noon, Clara had talked herself out of crying and into anger. She cleaned the house, scrubbed the floor until her knuckles ached, beat the dust from the quilt and hung it on the line, organized her trunk 3 times, rearranging the same few possessions like the order mattered. It didn't help. His words kept circling. You deserve better than him. Easy to say when you had 4,000 acres. Easy to say when you could offer family like it was nothing. What did he know about deserving? What did any rich man know about what poor women deserved? Clara slammed the trunk lid, stood, walked to the window. The road stretched empty in both directions. No wagon, no horses, no sign that Caleb Stone and his daughter had ever been here at all. Good. That was good. That was what she wanted. She told herself that until the words lost meaning. The general store was a 2-mile walk. Clara made it by mid-afternoon, her boots caked with mud, her dress damp at the hem. She needed salt, needed coffee if she could afford it, needed to stop thinking about braids and firewood and letters written on expensive paper. The store smelled of tobacco and leather and pickled things. Mrs. Henley stood behind the counter, same as always, her gray hair pinned tight beneath a calico bonnet and her eyes missing nothing. "Miss Mercer," Heard you had visitors. Clara's jaw tightened. Small towns. Nothing stayed secret. Just travelers. Storm caught them. Mrs. Henley's eyebrows rose. Some travelers. Caleb Stone don't usually shelter in boarding houses. Got a ranch big enough to fit this whole town twice over. Clara set her coins on the counter. Salt and coffee if this covers it. The older woman measured out the salt. Her hands moved slow, deliberate. You know about him. Then Stone. I know enough. Doubt that. Mrs. Henley scooped coffee beans into a paper sack. Man lost his wife 2 years back. Didn't die, just left. Took off with a cattle buyer from Kansas City. Left the girl behind without a backward look. Clara's hand stilled on the coins. Folks say he ain't been the same since. Keeps to himself. Works the land. Raises that little girl alone. Mrs. Henley pushed the coffee across the counter. Some men break when their women leave. Caleb Stone just got quieter. Clara didn't know what to say. She picked up her purchases, turned toward the door. One more thing. Mrs. Henley's voice followed her. Hoskins came through here this morning, asking about you. Wanted to know if you'd been keeping company with anyone. Clara stopped. What did you tell him? Told him I mind my own business. The older woman's eyes were sharp. Which is more than I can say for him. That man's got a temper. Miss Mercer, my husband worked his ranch 3 seasons back. Quit after Hoskins took a horsewhip to a hand who dropped a feed bucket. The coffee felt heavy in Clara's arms. A horsewhip. Drew blood. The hand was 16 years old. Mrs. Henley folded her arms across her chest. Boy's family tried to make trouble, but Hoskins got lawyers. Nothing came of it except the boys got scars and Hoskins kept right on doing what he does. Clara's stomach turned. She thought of those scarred knuckles, the way Hoskins had looked at her on the porch measuring, calculating, like she was something to be broken in. Why are you telling me this? Mrs. Henley shrugged. Because someone should. Because I got a daughter about your age. And I'd want someone to tell her. She paused. And because that Stone man looked at you like you was worth something, in my experience, that's rarer than rich. Clara walked home in silence. The sun hung low by the time she reached the boarding house. Her feet ached, her shoulders burned from carrying the supplies. But the pain felt distant, muffled by the weight of what she'd learned. Hoskins had taken a horsewhip to a boy for dropping a bucket, and she was supposed to marry him, live in his house, bear his children. Clara set the coffee and salt on the table, sat in the rocking chair, looked at the letter still folded on the seat beside her. You deserve better than him. Maybe she did, but deserving didn't put food on the table. Deserving didn't pay for a roof or clothes or the 1,000 small things a woman alone couldn't provide for herself. She had no skills worth money, no family to take her in. The boarding house belonged to a cousin who wanted it back by winter. The mail order arrangement with Hoskins was the only option she'd had, the only door that opened when all the others slammed shut. And now Caleb Stone was offering another door. But at what cost charity stung worse than hunger. Pity cut deeper than poverty. She'd rather scrub floors for strangers than take handouts from a rich man who tested her like she was livestock at auction, not as charity, as family. The words wouldn't leave her alone. Clara pulled the letter out. Read it again. This time she noticed the way his handwriting slanted, rushed, like he'd written it fast, before he could talk himself out of it. She noticed the ink blot at the bottom, where he'd pressed too hard, the slight wrinkle, like the paper had been folded and unfolded before he'd left it. He'd thought about what to say, changed his mind, said it anyway. That counted for something. She didn't know what, but it counted. Outside, the light faded. Clara sat in the growing dark, letter in her lap, quilt across her knees. Hoskins would send someone when the road cleared. 4 days, maybe 5. The stage would come, and she would have to choose. A man who measured her like cattle, or a man who'd left before dawn because she'd told him to go but couldn't leave without writing her first. Neither felt like a real choice. Both felt like surrender. Clara closed her eyes, let the silence settle. The knock came just as the last light died. Not loud, not demanding. 3 soft raps, like whoever stood there wasn't sure they wanted to be heard. Clara rose, crossed to the door, put her hand on the latch. Who's there? A pause. Then a voice she knew, small, trembling, exhausted. "Miss Clara, it's Lily. I runned away." Clara yanked the door open. Lily stood on the porch, nightgown soaked through, bare feet black with mud. Her braids had come undone, hair plastered to her cheeks in wet tangles. She swayed where she stood, one hand gripping the door frame to keep upright. "Lord have mercy!" Clara dropped to her knees and pulled the child inside. "How did you get here? Where's your papa?" "Line cabin?" Lily's voice came in hitches, thin and ragged. "Mile down the road. Papa was sleeping. I sneaked out." A mile. In the dark. Barefoot. Clara's hands moved fast, stripped the wet nightgown, wrapped the child in the quilt, lifted her onto the chair by the stove. She fed the fire until it roared, then knelt and rubbed Lily's arms through the fabric, hard and fast. "You walked a mile in the dark by yourself." Lily nodded. Her teeth clicked together. Her lips had gone pale. Not blue like that first night, but close. "Why, Lily? Why would you do that?" The child's face crumpled. "Because you're gonna go to the mean man, and I don't want you to. I want you to stay with us." Clara's hands stilled. "Sweetheart, Papa told the fence man about Hoskins." Lily's words tumbled out, rushed and desperate. "He said Hoskins hurts horses, hurts people who work for him. He said he wouldn't sell a single cow to that man if Hoskins was the last buyer in the territory." Her chin trembled. "You can't go to him. Miss Clara, you can't." Clara pulled the child close, held her tight. Lily's wet hair pressed cold against her neck, smelling of mud and rain and fear. "How do you know all this?" "I listened, at the window, when Papa was talking to Mr. Henley's boy." Lily's fingers gripped Clara's sleeve. "Papa's scared for you. I can tell. He don't say it, but I can tell." Clara closed her eyes. The fire crackled. Wind pushed against the walls, rattling the window she'd watched Caleb fix just yesterday. "Your papa's gonna be worried sick when he finds you gone." "I don't care. Lily, I don't care." The child pulled back. Her face was wet tears and rain and mud, all mixed together. "You sang to me. Mama never sang to me. Not once. She never braided my hair neither. She never even looked at me like you do." Clara's throat closed. "Like I do. Like I matter." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "Like I'm real." The words hit somewhere deep, somewhere Clara had kept locked since her own mother died, since her father walked away, since her cousin looked at her with pity and said, "You ain't pretty, but you're strong." She pulled Lily close again, pressed her lips to the child's damp hair. "You matter," she whispered. "You're real. You're the realest thing I've touched in years." Lily's arms wrapped around her neck, held on like letting go meant drowning. They stayed like that, rocking by the fire, until Lily's shaking eased, until the child's breathing slowed and steadied, until her weight grew heavy with exhaustion. "Just stay till Papa comes," Lily murmured. "Please, he always comes." "I'll stay." Caleb found the empty cot at midnight. The blankets lay thrown back. The window of the line cabin stood open, curtain flapping in the wind. Lily's boots sat by the door, untouched. He was on his horse before his mind caught up to his body. The stone ranch sat 6 miles from Clara's boarding house, too far, even for him, riding hard in the dark. But the line cabin was closer, a mile, maybe less. He'd brought Lily there because he couldn't face the main house, couldn't face the empty rooms where his wife had lived and left. 1 mile. Lily couldn't have walked farther than that. She wouldn't. He pushed the horse too hard. The animal stumbled on a root hidden in the dark, and Caleb went over the neck, hit the ground shoulder first, rolled twice, mud everywhere. He lay face down in a puddle, cold water soaking through his shirt, grit in his teeth. When he tried to push himself up, his hands sank to the wrists. He slipped, went down again, face scraping the muck. This was what he'd become, a rich man crawling in the mud, a father who couldn't keep his daughter safe, a coward who tested a woman's heart instead of trusting it. His wife had left because the ranch was lonely. His daughter was running away because he was lonelier. And Clara had looked at him with betrayal in her eyes, and she'd been right. He'd watched her give away everything she owned, and he'd told himself he was protecting himself, protecting Lily, but he'd just been scared. Caleb pushed himself to his knees. Mud dripped from his chin, his chest, his hands. The horse stood a few yards away, waiting, sides heaving. He caught the reins, mounted, kept riding. The boarding house appeared through the trees 10 minutes later. Light glowed in the window. Smoke rose from the chimney. He dismounted at the porch, his legs nearly buckled. His boots squelched with every step, leaving black prints on the boards. He looked like something dragged from a grave, mud-caked, wild-eyed, stripped of every pretense he'd ever worn. The door opened before he could knock. Clara stood in the lamplight. Her eyes moved over him, the mud, the torn shirt, the desperate look he knew he wore. "Lily," his voice scraped raw. "Is she—" Clara stepped aside. He saw his daughter then, asleep in the chair by the fire, wrapped in the quilt, face flushed with warmth, braids undone and tangled. His knees gave out. He caught himself on the doorframe, just barely. His chest heaved. His eyes burned. "She walked here." Clara's voice came quiet. From the line cabin, in her nightgown, barefoot. Caleb couldn't speak. "She said you told the fence man about Hoskins, said you wouldn't sell cattle to him." He nodded. "Once." "Why didn't you tell me that—" Clara stepped closer. Instead of leaving a letter and running off before dawn like some kind of, she stopped, looked at the mud coating him head to foot. "What happened to you?" Horse stumbled. The words came thick. "I fell. In the mud. In the mud." She stared at him. He waited for the disgust, the pity, the dismissal. Instead, she crossed to the basin by the stove, wrung out a cloth, walked back, and pressed it into his hands. "Clean your face. You're scaring her." Caleb looked down at the cloth, at her hands, rough and chapped from work, at her face, tired and guarded, but not closed, not gone. "Clara, clean your face first, then talk." He wiped the mud away. His hands shook. When he finished, he looked like a man who'd been through a war, exhausted, broken, humbled. "I was ashamed," he said. "That's why I left before dawn. Ashamed of how I'd tested you. Ashamed I couldn't just be honest from the start. Ashamed that my daughter had to walk through the dark to do what I was too scared to do. And what was that? Ask you to stay." The fire popped. Lily shifted in her sleep. The wind pressed against the windows. Clara looked at him, mud-streaked, humiliated, stripped of everything but the truth. "She said I look at her like she's real," Clara said, "like she matters." "You do. I told her she's the realest thing I've touched in years." Clara's hands twisted in her apron. "And I meant it. But I don't know how to be charity. Caleb, I don't know how to take without giving back." "Then don't." He stepped forward, stopped, left space between them. "Don't be charity. Be family. Be Lily's." His voice cracked. "Be mine. If you'll have me." Clara's breath caught. Before she could answer, hooves thundered on the road. Not one horse. Several. Moving fast. Coming closer. Caleb turned toward the window. 3 riders. The lead horse pulled up hard at the gate. A man swung down, his silhouette broad and heavy against the dark. Clara's hand found Caleb's arm. "Hoskins," she whispered. "He said he'd come back to check." Hoskins walked toward the porch like a man who owned the ground under his boots. "Well now," his voice came slow, thick with satisfaction. "Ain't this cozy? My bride-to-be, entertaining Mr. Caleb Stone himself, at midnight, in her night clothes." Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between Hoskins and the door. His clothes were still caked with mud. His hands hung empty at his sides. "This ain't what it looks like. No." Hoskins stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. The 2 riders behind him stayed mounted, their horses shifting, restless. One of them younger, maybe 20, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Looks like a man covered in mud standing on my property. Property I paid good money for." "I ain't property." Clara's voice came from behind Caleb, sharp, steady. "I'm a woman who agreed to a contract that ain't been signed yet." Hoskins' eyes moved past Caleb to Clara. That measuring look again, the one that calculated value like she was cattle at auction. "Contract said you'd be ready when the road cleared. Contract said you'd come willing." His jaw tightened. "Don't look willing to me. Maybe I change my mind. Maybe you don't get to." Hoskins climbed the first step. His scarred knuckles caught the lamplight from the window. "I paid your cousin $50. I paid the stage fare. I paid for the license to be drawn up in Lawton. You think I'm gonna let some mud-covered rancher waltz in and take what's mine? Caleb's fists clenched. She ain't yours. Law says different. Another step. Law says I got a claim. Law says she owes me. Then I'll pay the debt. Caleb's voice came hard. $50 for the cousin, $20 for the stage, however much for the license. I'll pay it all, tonight, in cash. Hoskins stopped. His eyes narrowed. You think this is about money? Ain't it always? Something shifted in Hoskins' face. Something ugly and raw. Maybe I don't want your money, Stone. Maybe I want what I was promised. A woman to cook my meals and warm my bed and keep her mouth shut when I tell her to. One of the mounted men, the older one, with a gray beard and weathered face, shifted in his saddle. His horse stamped. He didn't look comfortable. Boss, he said, maybe we should shut up, Garrett. Clara stepped forward, shoulder to shoulder with Caleb, her chin lifted. I heard about you, she said. Heard you took a horsewhip to a boy for dropping a feed bucket. Heard you work your hands till they drop and don't pay them fair. Heard you break horses the hard way instead of the right way. Hoskins' face went dark. Who told you that? Don't matter who told me. Matters that it's true. The silence stretched. The younger rider looked at the older one. The older one looked at the ground. Get on my wagon. Hoskins' voice dropped low. Dangerous. Now. No. He moved fast. Faster than Clara expected. His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist, yanked her forward. She stumbled down the porch steps, caught herself on the railing, felt his fingers grind bone against bone. Caleb lunged. Hoskins' other hand came up, not a fist, but a warning. You touch me, Stone, and I'll have the law on you by morning. Assault on a man claiming his legal property. You want that kind of trouble. Caleb froze. His whole body shook with the effort of holding back. Let her go. When I'm ready. Boss, the older rider's voice again. Garrett. Boss, that's Caleb Stone. The Caleb Stone. You really want to make an enemy of the biggest ranch in the territory. Over one woman? Hoskins didn't turn, but his grip on Clara's wrist loosened. Just slightly. Stay out of this. Garrett, I'm just saying. Garrett's horse shifted again. Stone's got lawyers too. Better ones than yours, I'd wager. And friends in Lawton. Friends who wouldn't look kindly on a man who, I said shut up. But the damage was done. Clara saw it in the way Hoskins' jaw worked. He was calculating again, not her value this time, but the cost, the risk, what he stood to lose if he pushed this. The younger rider spoke for the first time. His voice cracked on the words. Mr. Hoskins, sir, I don't want no trouble with the Stone Ranch. My family leases grazing land from them. If Mr. Stone takes offense, for crying out loud, Hoskins released Clara's wrist. She stumbled back, rubbing the marks his fingers had left. That was when Lily appeared in the doorway. She stood in her nightgown, the quilt trailing behind her, face pale in the lamplight. Her eyes were wide and wet, fixed on Clara. Don't hurt Miss Clara, she said. Her voice was small, trembling, but she didn't look away. Please, she's nice. She sang to me. Hoskins stared at the child. Something flickered in his face, not softness, not redemption, but recognition, like he was seeing something from a long time ago, something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it was there. Sang to you, he repeated. The words came strange, flat. My mama never sang to me. Lily's chin quivered. Miss Clara did. She braided my hair too. 3 braids. The silence stretched. Hoskins looked at Lily, then at Clara, still rubbing her wrist, then at Caleb, mud-caked and exhausted and ready to fight. Then at his 2 men, both of them avoiding his eyes, both of them clearly wishing they were anywhere else. This ain't worth it, Garrett muttered. 1 woman ain't worth making enemies of half the territory. Hoskins' hands flexed at his sides. His scarred knuckles went white, then red, then white again. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Hoskins turned, walked back to his horse, mounted without looking at anyone. Keep your money, he said to Caleb. His voice was cold, hard, but there was something else underneath, not softness, but exhaustion. The kind that came from fighting too long against something you couldn't beat. Contract's void. She ain't worth the trouble. He wheeled his horse, rode out without looking back. The 2 men followed. Garrett tipped his hat to Clara as he passed a small gesture, almost apologetic. Then they were gone, swallowed by the dark. Clara's knees buckled. She sat down hard on the porch steps, hands shaking, breath coming too fast. Caleb dropped beside her. His hand found hers. He's gone, he said. The words sounded distant, stunned. He just left. Clara couldn't answer. Her wrist throbbed where Hoskins had grabbed her. She looked at Lily, still standing in the doorway, quilt pulled around her bare feet. Did I do good? Lily asked. Clara opened her arms. The child ran to her, climbed into her lap, buried her face against Clara's neck. Clara held her tight. Let the tears come. You did good, she whispered. You did so good. Caleb's arm came around them both. He smelled like mud and sweat and horses, and Clara didn't care. She leaned into him, let herself be held. The night pressed close around them. Somewhere down the road, hoofbeats faded into silence. They sat on the porch until the shaking stopped. Lily fell asleep in Clara's lap, exhausted from her midnight walk and the confrontation she'd walked into. Caleb didn't try to move her, just sat beside them, close enough that their shoulders touched. He would have dragged me off, Clara said. Her voice came hollow. If your men hadn't spoken up, if they hadn't reminded him what he stood to lose, I know. He didn't leave because of Lily. He left because of you, because you're rich and he's not stupid enough to make an enemy of the Stone Ranch. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Does it matter why he left? Clara looked at her wrist. The marks were already darkening into bruises. Tomorrow they'd be purple. The day after, yellow. A week from now, gone. But she'd remember. It matters to me, she said. It matters that you were here, that your name meant something, that I wasn't alone. You're not alone. Caleb's hand tightened on hers. You don't have to be alone again. Not ever. Clara looked at him, at the mud still drying on his face, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the way he held her hand like he was afraid she'd disappear. You asked me something, she said. Before Hoskins came, you asked me to be family, to be yours. His breath caught. I remember. I ain't saying yes yet. She held up her other hand, before he could speak. "I'm saying I ain't saying no. I'm saying we got time now. Time to figure out if this is real. It's real. Maybe, maybe not." She looked down at Lily, sleeping peaceful against her chest. "But I ain't going to Hoskins, and I ain't leaving this child. So I reckon we got some things to work out." Caleb nodded. The disappointment showed, but so did hope. And something else. Relief. Maybe. Gratitude. "How long?" he asked. Clara thought about it. About the bruises on her wrist. About the letter he'd written. About the way he'd crawled through mud to find his daughter. "Long enough to be sure," she said. "Long enough that neither of us wakes up in a year wondering what we got ourselves into." He held out his hand, palm up, waiting. Clara looked at it for a long moment. Then she took it. Clara woke to sunlight, real sunlight, not the gray wash of storm clouds, but golden light streaming through the window, catching dust motes, warming the worn floorboards. She lay still for a moment, listening. Birds outside, the creak of the rocking chair on the porch, Lily's soft breathing from the cot in the corner, and something else. The smell of coffee, fresh coffee, brewing on her stove. She rose, found her dress the same patched calico she'd worn for days now, and pulled it on. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a woman with tangled hair and tired eyes. She didn't look like someone whose life had changed overnight, but it had. She felt it in her bones. The main room was empty. The fire burned low in the grate. A pot of coffee sat on the stove, steam curling from the spout. Through the window, she could see Caleb on the porch, rocking slow, watching the road. Clara poured herself a cup. The tin was warm in her hands. She breathed in the smell, bitter and dark and familiar, and let herself think. Last night felt like a dream. Hoskins riding up with his men, his hand on her wrist, grinding bone. The way his riders had shifted, uncomfortable, unwilling to cross the stone name. And then gone. The man who'd paid for her like livestock had simply turned and ridden away. Not because he'd changed, not because Lily's words had touched something soft in him, because he'd calculated the cost, measured the risk, and decided she wasn't worth the trouble. She should feel grateful. She did feel grateful. But underneath the relief, something else stirred. She'd been saved by a name, by money, by the power Caleb Stone carried without even trying. What did that make her? Clara looked at her wrist. The bruises had darkened overnight purple and black, the shape of fingers pressed into flesh. She touched them. The skin was tender, swollen. She'd carry these marks for a week. Then they'd fade. But she'd remember the feeling of being grabbed, of being claimed, of being property in a man's eyes. Never again. The thought rose up from somewhere deep. She let it settle. Her trunk sat by the door, still packed. Her mother's quilt lay folded on top. She'd put it there last night, before Hoskins came, before everything changed. She crossed to it now, ran her fingers over the worn fabric. The quilt had been her mother's wedding gift, stitched by her grandmother, passed down through 3 generations of Mercer women, blue and yellow and a red that had faded to pink with washing. Every square held a memory. Every stitch was an act of love. She'd meant to take it to Hoskins' ranch, to spread it on a stranger's bed and pretend it made the place home. Now she didn't have to. Clara opened the trunk, looked at the few things inside: 2 dresses, a hairbrush, a Bible with her mother's name on the flyleaf, everything she owned in the world. She closed the lid, left it packed. Not because she was leaving, because she wasn't ready yet to stay long enough to be sure. She'd said that last night, meant it. Caleb Stone was kind and he was gentle, and he'd crawled through mud to find his daughter. But she'd known him for 3 days. 3 days wasn't enough to build a life on. She needed time, needed to know this was real, needed to be sure she wasn't trading one cage for another, even if the new one had gilded bars. The door creaked, small feet on the floorboards. Lily appeared in her nightgown, the quilt trailing behind her like a cape, her braids, Clara's braids, tangled from sleep. "Miss Clara." "Right here, sweetheart." Lily crossed the room, climbed into Clara's lap without asking. The way she'd done a dozen times in 3 days. Her small body was warm and solid, her head fitting perfectly under Clara's chin. Is the mean man gone? He's gone. Forever. Clara smoothed the tangled hair. "I think so. Yes." Lily was quiet for a moment. Her fingers played with the button on Clara's dress, the same gesture Caleb made when he was thinking. "Are you staying?" The question hung there, simple, direct, the way children asked things, without all the layers adults piled on top. Clara looked at the window, at the road stretching away into the distance, at the trunk sitting packed by the door. She thought about every person who'd ever told her she wasn't enough. Her cousin, arranging the mail order contract with a pitying look. Her father, walking away when the hard times came. The neighbor women who'd whispered about the Mercer girl with no prospects and no beauty and nothing to offer but strong hands. Ain't no one else ever gonna tell me what I'm worth. "Yes," she said. "I'm staying." Lily's arms tightened around her neck. "Forever. Forever's a long time, sweetheart. Let's start with tomorrow. Tomorrow's good. Tomorrow's real good." They sat like that until the coffee grew cold in Clara's cup, until the sunlight shifted and the birds quieted and the morning stretched toward noon. Then Lily wiggled free. "I got something for you. Wait here." She disappeared out the door, bare feet slapping the porch boards. Clara heard her talking to Caleb, high voice and low voice. Words she couldn't make out, and then the slap of feet again. Coming back. Lily held out her hand. A prairie rose, pink petals, edges already wilting, a few leaves still attached to the short stem. "I picked it for you," Lily said. "For staying." Clara's throat closed. She knelt down, took the flower with both hands, careful as if it were made of glass. The petals were soft against her fingers. A thorn pricked her thumb, a single drop of blood, bright against her skin. She didn't care. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's beautiful. Papa said I could pick it from the bush by the road." Lily bounced on her toes. "He said you'd like it." Clara looked up. Caleb stood in the doorway, shoulder against the frame, watching them. His clothes were clean now. He must have washed in the creek, but his face still carried the weariness of the night before. "She wanted to give you something," he said. Couldn't talk her out of it. Clara rose. The rose stayed in her hand. I'm glad you didn't. She crossed to her trunk, opened the lid, lifted out her mother's quilt, let it unfold, the faded colors catching the morning light. Lily watched with wide eyes. Miss Clara, what are you doing? Clara carried the quilt to the cot where Lily had slept, spread it out, smoothed the wrinkles, tucked the edges under the thin mattress. This was my mama's, she said. Her voice came steady, though her hands shook. Now it's yours. Lily's mouth fell open. Mine, really yours. The child threw herself onto the cot, pulled the quilt up to her chin, rolled back and forth, feeling the fabric against her cheeks. It smells like flowers, she said. And something else, something old. Lavender. My mama used to put lavender in the chest where she kept it. Lily buried her face in the quilt, breathed deep. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears she was too young to understand. I'm going to keep it forever. You do that. Clara turned. Caleb still stood in the doorway. His throat worked once. His eyes shone wet. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. Clara walked past him onto the porch. The afternoon sun hit her face, warm and golden. The prairie stretched away in every direction. Brown grass, red dirt, sky so blue it hurt to look at. Two rocking chairs sat side by side now. Caleb must have brought the second one from somewhere. It was rougher than hers, the wood newer, the runners still stiff. She sat down, rocked once, twice. Caleb settled into the chair beside her. His hand found hers on the armrest. His fingers laced through hers, work roughened, warm, steady. I ain't saying yes yet, Clara said. I know, but I ain't saying no neither. His grip tightened. Just a little. That's enough for me. They rocked in silence, watched the light change, listened to Lily inside, singing something without words, the quilt wrapped around her shoulders. Clara thought about the bruises on her wrist, the letter she'd burned that morning, watching the paper curl black in the stove, the road that stretched east toward Lawton, toward a life she'd almost lived. She thought about what she'd found instead, a child who looked at her like she mattered, a man who'd crawled through mud to find his daughter, a quilt on a bed, given freely, received with joy. Tomorrow. That was enough for now. Tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. The road stretched away to the east, empty and quiet. The stage would come eventually. People would travel to places she'd never see. But Clara wasn't going anywhere. She was already home. There's something quiet that settles after a story like this one. Something tender, maybe a little heavy, that sits in the chest without asking to be named. A woman who gave away her last blanket. A man too scared to be honest. A child who walked through the dark because she didn't want to lose someone she'd only just found. Many of us have been there. Not on a porch in Oklahoma, perhaps, but somewhere familiar. Carrying something we couldn't put down. Loving someone who didn't know how to stay. Wanting to be seen and wondering if we ever would be. Some of us have been Clara, giving what we couldn't afford to lose. Some of us have been Caleb, hiding behind walls we built to keep from getting hurt again. Some of us have been Lily, running toward the one person who made us feel real. It's all right if this story didn't answer anything. It's okay if it opens something instead. Not everything needs to be resolved. Some things are allowed to rest, unfinished, in the quiet. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.